Thanks for tuning in to Stay Sharp with Razorleaf, your secret weapon for all things digital and manufacturing. In this episode, Doubell and Jen Ferello invited Peter Schroer, the former CEO of Aras Corporation, to join the podcast to share some insights about the state of PLM now that Peter is officially retired. Eric and Peter reflect on what has changed in PLM, and more interestingly, what hasn't changed since he founded Aras more than 2 decades ago. While acronyms and technology have evolved to embrace new thinking, the common business problems remain the same. Peter shares his candid insights on what he thinks is the real issue underlying PLM adoption in manufacturing. Tune in with Eric, Peter, and Jen to hear some of the hard truths about PLM today.
Hey, welcome back, everybody, to Stay Sharp. This is the podcast where we talk about all things related to digital products and manufacturing. And today we're taking a look at where our industry is headed. And by that, I mean the digital manufacturing industry as a whole. Those of us who are actually doing the digital manufacturing and the rest of us who are supporting them with tools and services, et cetera. I would like to welcome both my CEO, Eric Doubell, as well as our special guest, Peter Schroer. Peter, if you haven't met him yet, is the founder of Aras Corporation. And although he is recently retired from primary action, brings a wealth of knowledge and experience in PLM and the technologies driving innovation in product manufacturing to our humble podcast. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you.
Please tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and maybe a little bit about Aras, why you started Aras in the beginning.
Oh, sure. So we'll start with the important thing. I'm an engineer. And we started Aras in January of 2000. The intention, having been in the PLM industry for years before that and 2 previous companies, just realized that PLM was difficult to do. And frankly, as an industry, we just weren't doing it right. So we came to this with some fresh ideas, particularly around making PLM more flexible. I remember, so I came from 8 years of working on a factory floor at Data General. I've been in R&D and research at IBM and Data General. I came with some strong opinions on what we really needed to manage the digital transformation of both design and manufacturing. So I founded Aras in 2000. Had the opportunity to retire 2021. So the October 21, I retired. Still very active there. I'm on the board of Aras. But I'm frankly no operating responsibility, and I'm using some of my free time to spend with startups in adjacencies to the PLM market. So that's kind of fun, but definitely not planning to start another company, and no operating roles for me.
So you've kind of addressed this already, Peter, but I know I was kind of curious. I'm sure a lot of others are. Is how retired are you after having seen you work for 20 years and the things you've done? How retired are you?
I would say I'm actually very retired, and I'm enjoying it. I heard the expression from a colleague, "small R retired," and that kind of fits. I'm on the board. I'm on the board of 3 companies. I'm an advisor to another 3, which are kind of early stage, not even ready to have a board of directors yet, or even investors. Yeah, honestly, I like supporting entrepreneurs that are doing interesting work, not specifically PLM, but around the engineering, manufacturing, software automation space.
So it's fun work now, not work.
It's fun work. And then when it gets down to actually making quotas or getting the job done, I can just, walk away and let the entrepreneur take the dirty work.
It doesn't sound terribly retired to me, just...
Yeah, no, but I am for sure retired. I mean, I'm not. And a lot of people ask me, "Are you going to jump in and start another one?" And I no plans for that.
It takes a lot of energy.
Yes, I do not miss the travel. the nearly 100% travel for 20 years was just a little much.
So you've been doing it a long time. You've seen a lot of different things. So what's really the most impressive digital thing you think you've seen, in the real world?
Actually, done. Yeah, actually done in the real world, not just like the visions we all paint.
Mm-hmm.
What's the most impressive thing you've seen implemented and done?
So I don't know if the audience knows Aras well, but we're, most of the PLM industry, starting as PDM industry, very, very CAD centric. The birth of the tool was to manage the complexity of 3D file structure. And even today, a lot of the PLM that's being deployed is just there to manage 3D. What I got real excited about was watching companies take the Aras platform and use it in completely different ways. I mean, we've had customers that have done everything from requirements management, BOM management, supplier management, all the way through. They actually built a CRM system on the platform, and even inventory management in a single instance of Aras's PLM database. Really, really, that's in my mind. That's just really clever. It's leveraging the tool, and we're some of us with our marketing hype are walking around talking about digital threads, all this and that. I mean, here's 10, 15 years ago where companies had full end-to-end traceability from requirements through inventory on the shop floor, all being managed in a single database. I mean, these guys they were doing it. Not a lot of hype. They just sat down and started to build out the solution. And to me, that's just very impressive when you get someone who's come very close to that idea of the single version of the truth.
Yeah, we actually, I think we saw a customer together that used it for quality, and they maintain all of their tolerances and things like that, and used it for a quality system, not anything else related to standard PLM.
Absolutely. I mean, I'll tell you, the examples are endless, but they're kind of what made that was the joy of my Aras journey. U.S. Army used Aras for years and years as a tool crib, right? So you're like, okay, what's a tool crib got to do with PLM? Well, in the manufacturing that they do, which was cannon barrels for bunker busters and Abrams tanks, literally every one that they're building is different. So their manufacturing process plan, which was a huge data model and very complex, different for everyone. And they're literally calling out specific serial numbers of tools that were appropriate for the work centers that they were going to build on. It's a massive configuration management problem. It is PLM, but you go to the average marketing department in our industry, a tool crib doesn't sound like that exciting. But to me, was just a great use of a platform.
Well, that's interesting that you point out configuration management, because before PLM became the big name 15, 20 years ago, configuration management was the industry. And configuration management is different, but the same. It just doesn't necessarily include the 3D and the engineering component.
Absolutely. And I think that's the secret sauce that most of our industry has kind of lost sight of, is this never really was just about a folder full of 3D CAD files. There's configuration management is a ton of information that has to get matched to the version of the product that you're building or supporting out in the field.
I mean, you use the example with the military thing. I've seen other configuration management that manages logistics for field operations for deployment of troops to, critical areas of the world.
Absolutely.
So, you've talked a little bit about how you kind of built Aras because you didn't think that the standard PLM systems were doing things the right way or weren't addressing everything. So over that period of time, how have you seen the tools and systems changing?
Well, I'll give you this is like the end of career, old crotchety retired guy looking back.
Why do you think we asked you on? You can't handle the truth.
Exactly. You can't handle it. Yeah, how are the tools and systems changing? I mean, honestly, I've been in manufacturing myself. I've been in design. Then I jumped to the vendor side with 3 different PLM companies, including Aras to end my career. I mean, I've seen it all. I got to tell you, how are the tools and systems changing? Frankly, just not fast enough. It still astounds me. I mean, up until I retired in mid 21 there, I could still go visit a customer and they were suffering still with the same core engineering and manufacturing problems as when I started my career 35 years ago. We've had incremental improvements, to be sure. I think there's been a lot of 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of going, or maybe it's 2 steps back, 1 forward. But My opinion is, again, great place if you want to have a career in software. The digital transformation of manufacturing is still not done, and we're not getting to it fast enough. So if you're, if you want to talk about trends and cool stuff that's happening on this podcast, I'd love to hear it. Maybe it's all happened since I retired, but frankly, when most of the real manufacturing companies, the hardcore guys that I've, automotive, aerospace, defense, high tech electronics, places I hang out, they still have just basic configuration management problems. They can't distribute files. They've got almost zero security on the data that's in their vaults. This is the same problems, Eric, when you and I started our career.
So I have a question on that, though. Is it, in those instances, is it that the tools aren't changing fast enough, or is it that the people aren't implementing them fast enough, or they're not changing fast enough? I mean, OCM's a real thing too.
Yeah, well, you're on the right track. So what's the root cause here? And I got the benefit now of some free time and looking backwards, right? Our industry, like all of them, right? There's a lot of Madison Avenue. There's a lot of hype, a lot of marketing, and frankly, the vendors in our space, the bulk of them, have not done us all a real big favor with this kind of the myth of the out of the box solution. Let's try to make PLM simple, easy to buy, easy to deploy. Frankly, the issue is that no successful business, that doesn't matter whether you're making car parts or airplanes or whatever, you can't be standing still, right? And if you seriously believe that you're going to learn best practices from an engineering software company, you're sadly mistaken. I mean, it's just not. It doesn't. You can't imagine that the brand X PLM system, who's selling into probably 10 different vertical industries of all different size companies in different countries, and they have an out of the box solutions that's exactly what you're supposed to be doing for your processes. So back to Jen's point, is the problem the vendors or even the customers are doing it wrong? Frankly, it's a lot of both. The idea that PLM is a piece of software, I can buy it, going to come with best practices, and then we're done. It's a project, and when the project's done, that part of my business is fixed. That's just a myth. PLM is more of a philosophy. It's an understanding the goals of the one version of the truth database, the goals of good, consistent configuration management, of having traceability. But it's a process of continuous improvement. And I got to tell you, as we get through the podcast here, you're going to say, I've got a real chip on my shoulder on this out of the box idea. I think the software companies have really done a disservice to the industry, the customers, with this illusion that it works. Your business has to change, right? I mean, the world I came from, and I've worked in a lot of industries, and I've been in a lot of factory floors, and the people that are excelling in making quality products are the ones that do continuous improvement. Their data models and process models change all the time because that's how they get better. You can't lean into out of the box because you're basically, that's looking backwards. And we really want our customers to look forward and think about having a platform that adapts to their needs and even helps them as a catalyst to change.
So how much of that is, do you think, because the solutions have become so big and try to encompass everything that you've got to simplify somewhere? And so you simplify and say, here's the way you do this so that as a vendor, you can provide all these various functionalities. And, maybe are we trying to do too much, each of the vendors, and we should instead figure out how to work with other systems, other processes that are out there?
That's a good point. I mean, there's PLM, when we encapsulate that the whole scope, right, is very big, complex, and very ugly. I mean, enormous data models, tremendous amount of data, tons of process models and rules and data access security. It is complicated. And I do think that vendors should provide a starting point, right? I mean, you want to onboard people quickly, you want to get them started. I think where a lot of the industry's fallen down, and obviously I don't want to make this a pitch for Aras, but I think where we've fallen down is bring a solution on site to the customer and then make it god awful hard for them to change that when they have to change a workflow next week. And the Aras idea, I still think is right. I'd love to see more companies adopting the approach, but we should be building these complex systems on low-code, no-code platforms that allow the customer to take full ownership of, I need to change the data model tomorrow. I don't need a busload of consultants. I just grab the mouse and I change the data model. And 2 weeks from now, we've done some review or our lean processes are taking us in a direction where we want to change a workflow. Grab the mouse, edit the workflow, save, and just keep going. We're making change way too difficult right now.
So one of the things I think about when you talk about that is, and I want to ask you more about this later, but not everybody in the C-suite really understands PLM. And so to some degree, it seems to me that vendors have to dumb down the message, simplify what it does to get that understanding. What CEO these days wants to buy a solution that says, well, we're going to have to customize this and we're going to continually have to change it? Is part of it just a marketing thing to sell? I mean, I understand that your chance of really making the tool fit how you need to do to excel as a business requires process change. But how practical is some of that with the buying behaviors that exist today?
Yeah, so we're still talking about PLM as if you're going out to buy a CRM or buy an ERP. There is a software component to PLM, but just again, this retired guy's viewpoint looking back, the customers that were really, really successful, I mean, just did incredible things in terms of driving optimization in their design processes, their manufacturing, the product quality got better. They were treating PLM almost like it's an approach or a methodology or a philosophy. And I think what you're dancing around a little bit there, Eric, was CFOs, CIOs, again, a big complex job, right? And they're you want to put things into buckets, and they'd love PLM to fit in a bucket like ERP does. And stop me if I go a little off on a tangent here, but think about it. I mean, ERP, basically your accounting, your materials management. There's gap standards on accounting. There's lots of best practices documented on inventory management. There's no competitive differentiation to the way you manage inventory. Even sales processes. I mean, you look at how frequently salesmen jump from company to company, right? There's nothing special about sales, right? There's no significant data model or process differences between companies at the sales level or the ERP level. So, yeah, a CIO or CFO, he's going to say, yeah, CEO, I can buy out-of-the-box software for inventory management or my CRM or something, right? But the customers that I called on as part of the Aras community, engineering and manufacturing are their number one competitive difference, right? I mean, no one's competing by having I can build a better plane than you because my accounting system is more gap. I mean, that doesn't even make sense, right? But and I had both Boeing and Airbus as customers, and I can tell you their engineering and their manufacturing practices completely different, but they both make great airplanes, right? And that differentiation was how they were winning customers, right? So kind of in my mind that the C-level has done pretty bad disservice to their companies by considering PLM a project. Finite schedule, finite budget, like a CRM, I'm going to buy it, put it in. PLM is more of a mindset, more of a continuous improvement project supported by some software, which is like a catalyst to help you get there.
A lot harder to put some ROI around, though.
Very difficult to put ROI around. And again, you're back to sort of the typical way people buy software, right? Where they, typical ROI analysis where I'm going to save whatever, But what's interesting when I look at some of our big customers, and I won't mention any names, but we had two very, very large automotive customers, OEMs. Honestly, they had absolutely no difficulty justifying PLM. There was no ROI analysis done in that buying process. Both of them had just done multi-million-dollar liability settlements, of course. So
that's helpful.
That was kind of helpful. So does everyone else have to wait till some customer liability problem, customer dies, whatever, some awful, before they can jump into PLM? But how do you put the the return, the plus side of the equation on something like corporate liability. It's difficult, and I think the typical ROI analysis that you see a CFO do, is it's going to drive you to some low end out of the box PLM system because it's hard to find the value in tangible terms. Whereas what we're talking about is compliance, liability. We're long past. I mean, I can remember the early days of PLM. We used to talk about saving an engineer 10% of the time on each project, and you add it up across 1,000 engineers, and you could afford to buy a PLM system. It wasn't real. It wasn't real. I think people have to start thinking about PLM as more strategic. It's about limiting liability. It's about compliance, and it really is about designing and manufacturing great products.
So at the end of the day, you're saying that really PLM, the system is not the important part of PLM. The system is the means to make it happen, but that PLM is a philosophy. It's a strategy. So
Absolutely.
Do you think then that some of the marketing of the industry is starting to change a little bit? So, you're hearing more about digital transformation or, digitizing the organization or digital whatever. Do you think that starts to bring us closer to people thinking about these things as more of a philosophy and less of a system necessarily?
Yeah, I'm not sure who came up with the digital transformation term. I remember the last couple of years that I was at Aras, we did use that quite a bit. It was in a lot of my keynotes at our ACE conferences. I actually like that a lot. Digital transformation sounds to me, right? Sounds more of a journey rather than an event, right? And I think that's a very healthy way of looking at this. It's digital transformation is not something you buy in a box, install it, and now you have your company successful. It is a journey of continuous improvement. It's culture change on your employees. It's tools changes. It's design process changes, and that's it. I mean, that's the PLM is a philosophy of this journey, this transformation that you're embarking on. That might be the best thing that the industry marketing has done in the last couple of years is give us the word transformation rather than buy a piece of software.
So now we've got the marketing side of it down. So now we just have to figure out how to make the other stuff happen, right?
Well, I think the key thing here is you a lot of cultural change. I mean, change management in terms of helping your employees adapt to a new way of thinking about their business is important. And then, for me, flexible platforms. I mean, you have to plan on continuous improvement. Your business during transformation is going to change. You don't know where you're going to end up, and how can you pick software today that locks you into a solution that may not fit what you're doing in 2 years? That doesn't make sense.
So along those lines, I'd like to follow up with something that you had said a little earlier. You had described a customer that used Aras in a completely different way than for just PLM. So it wasn't so much a PLM system; it was the tool. It was the way that they used that. There's always been the debate for as long as I've been in my career between monolithic versus best in breed.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think there's a right answer to that question? To your point, it was easier for the customer because they had that digital thread. It was all in the same database.
Yeah. So I've thought about this, right? And I've been on both sides of that debate throughout my career, depending, and even the industry has gone through cycles where, IT was buying big monolithic systems. SAP sold a lot of software that way, right? And then the cycle would change and now better have best of breed. Each department gets the best tool. Frankly, when you step back and you look at it, it really is all best of breed. It just depends how big a scope you're implementing with this one software package. And I think the important thing for people to realize is there's not going to be a single system to solve all your data model, data process problems for all companies and all industries. You're always going to have a suite of tools. Now, you may have one application which is covering the traditional PLM footprint for you, right? or in the case of a lot of Aras customers, they've blurred the lines and they're into inventory management or tool cribs or other crazy things. But for them, those were essential touch points in the digital thread, right? So a tool crib, probably not useful for most companies, but for the Army, with what they were manufacturing and how they did it, knowing which serial number of tool went to a particular job, that was their digital thread. So that belonged in the PLM system. I think we're at a point where the scale of these platforms allows you to go a lot broader in your thinking now than we could 10 years ago. At some point, it was difficult to take a early team center and think about managing everything in it. It just got too big, right? Too complex. But the software scales better, the cloud scales better. And I think with the low code, no code approach, we're really getting to where there's some flexibility. You can start to think about building big data models, but you're never going to have a single monolithic system. There's going to be integrations everywhere.
So you talked earlier about a single source of truth. So basically what you're saying is that single source of truth is not a single system or even a single platform now, but maybe it's the digital thread?
Bingo, I think you nailed it. I mean, it's not the digital thread, and then maybe all the way at the end of the process, you've also got a digital twin representing instances of the product out in the field. But the single version of the truth is still the PLM goal, but not the PLM software, but the PLM as a methodology and a philosophy. It absolutely is, because most of the problems that we see, right, quality, safety, cost, schedule issues that pop up, they're all due to bad, wrong, unvalidated information. I found information in the factory. I started to use it. It turned out to be the wrong one, the wrong information for the job I'm working on, right? So the single source of truth is still our, what do they call it? The North Star, right? It was the direction we're headed in. But it's not a single piece of software. It's going to be a network of applications and processes and customer and training the employees, because it is really the only way we're going to solve the liability problems, the compliance problems, get cost, quality, schedule improvements in our product. We got to get the wrong information off the factory floor and out of the field, and that's having a single place in kind of a bigger network term, but not going to be a single piece of software.
Well, and I like, Eric, I like what you said there about it being the single source of truth being the digital thread, because that's a continuous thing. So it's not a starting point and then you branch off. It's the digital thread that lives through the life of the product. So that makes sense.
I agree.
So I've got, and this was totally off script, but with the advent of the cloud becoming so much more prevalent, you've got a lot of new players in the industry. You've got a lot of people covering new point solutions. And then you've got the large players trying to suck up all that space. Do you think there's opportunity in the market now for new companies to do innovative things in the PLM space? Or is it, have we missed that boat?
No, I absolutely believe there's opportunity. I mean, think back, Eric, to when I started Aras, right? The number of people who told me I was crazy because the market was already, PLM's already done. PTC, Siemens, Dassault, the market's already done. It's been defined. There's already 3 giant solutions available. And the answer is no. I mean, the customers need better solutions because their challenges keep getting tougher and tougher. There's always room for some innovation. Hype? No, I'm not big on hype. I'm really interested in the companies that I sit on the board of, highly focused on just let's build some incredibly useful software that engineers will love to use every day. No hype, no marketing, just as an engineer in XYZ industry or whatever, your industrial engineer or your electrical engineer, what do you need to make your job easier, to produce better product? And I think there's always room for that.
Do you hang out with John Hirschtick a lot? Because I feel like you guys would be good friends.
I know Hirschtick super well. John was a wonderful coach back when we started Aras. Marklin and I used to talk to John all the time for advice.
I can see that.
So it seems then that with some of the new stuff, there's opportunity for people who are very focused on improving, easily improving things for their end customers, for the users. So maybe it's requirements, or maybe it's a better way to do BOM management, but not necessarily to build out a new, 2030 Aras, but a new paradigm.
I honestly, Eric, I think both are possible and both are needed, right? And let me back up a little bit, right? You did pick out, configuration management or BOM management, requirements management, all very complex tasks for the average manufacturing company to do and do well, right? I mean, these are problems that are very tough to solve. They have not all been solved well. Certainly, there's room for those point apps, but in all those three cases, though, you're talking about things that must touch the digital thread. So you can't think you're going to start a company and become the world's best BOM manager and not have any great integrations, because that's just not how the digital thread needs to work. I'll just jump on my soapbox for a minute. I see a lot of business plans. I see a lot of ideas from entrepreneurs. My LinkedIn's like a magnet for the business plan of the hour. I get tons of them, but a lot of these people coming at it not as, hey, I want to make BOM change management easier for the electrical engineer, for example, right? They're coming at it as I've got this cloud thing and it's going to be really simple to deploy. And I'm like, the electrical engineer doesn't give two hoots whether you're running on the cloud, under his desk, or you're on his. He doesn't care. The quality engineer, the electrical engineer, the manufacturing engineer, they have a problem. They're trying to get that aircraft engine, fixed and back out in the field or something. They don't care about cloud. Cloud is like a non-issue for me. I want to find solutions where we look at what an engineer's role is, what their challenges are, and how do we build tools that make their lives easier. And cloud has got nothing to do with it.
So a little bit like the plumbing in your house. You don't care how it gets here, as long as hot comes on the left and cold comes on the right.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, that's been, anybody who's been following my ACE keynote presentations over the last 15, 20 years, that's one of my big soapboxes. We have to just build good software that's aligned with how engineers need to perform their work. Whether it's cloud or not means nothing to them, and maybe it means something to the software company, but it's not about making engineering and manufacturing better.
Right, it's just an enabling technology. It's one way to do it. So along those lines then, looking forward, what do you think is going to be different about like the life cycle of products in, say, 10 years? How are we going to develop or build or sustain, et cetera, differently in the future than we do now?
Yeah, and looking at a lot of business plans and talking to a lot of entrepreneurs, and there's actually some really good ideas out there. And I've distilled that down. I'm starting to, what's my viewpoint of where we're going with a lot of this. If you look at the career span that Eric and I've had, because we're roughly the same age.
I'm not that far behind you, right? Just so you know.
This era, we'll call this the 3D CAD era.
Okay.
Right? I mean, it's 3D CAD has dominated not just the kind of thought leadership, the marketing, analyst speak, and certainly driving big budgets, right? 3D CAD running on a workstation or running on the cloud, I really don't give a hoot, same thing, right? That's been it, right? I believe we are moving into another era where this whole idea of, I woke up in the morning, I need to design a plane. So I fire up my workstation, grab my favorite 3D CAD, and I start drawing surfaces and then the structure underneath. And that's not going to be happening in the future. We've talked a lot about digital thread, and you see me coming back to that a lot, which is effectively it's just configuration management. But where that drives me to is this idea that this whole idea of an engineer starting the design in CAD is probably wrong. And what we will see is a shift to where requirements management actually becomes that future entry point for design concept. And I think we're getting really close to where we see like AI, generative, and simulation kind of working together to take requirements and design, simulate, test thousands of design concepts, while that engineer is just out getting coffee. Now, I think that's where we're going. I think we've got a long ways to go. If you think about state of the art right now, engineers still lose 3D CAD files, and that's after decades of, Aras and Team Center and Windchill. It's just, and Innovia. They have a lot of solutions, and they still lose their CAD files. We start creating CAD configurations at like 1,000 times the rate. There's going to be some challenges.
I would think so.
But I think that is the direction. So Eric brought that up near the beginning of our discussion. Requirements management, not done well today. But if you think about it, that's the real design capture: is what is the intent of my product, and the parameters that it needs to operate within. And that might be the place where we start to see some more innovation soon.
That'll be interesting because the CEO and owner of the first company I worked at, which was ITI, his name was Jack Lemmon, not to be confused with the actor, had started SDRC, and his mantra back then was always analysis leads design.
Yes.
So now, like 35 years later, we're getting close where we can potentially envision that.
And I think unfortunately that's been sort of, the IT hardware, cloud infrastructure, even some of the sophistication on the software tools wasn't there 30 years ago.
Sure. Wasn't possible.
But he had absolutely the right idea. Yeah.
So one of the things you're kind of talking about is really another acronym we want to throw into it is, model-based enterprise. Really, you're talking about functional modeling as opposed to, starting with the design. You want to start with the outcome and develop from there, right? That's basically what you're saying?
Absolutely. So the model-based engineering or the model-based enterprise is exactly the right direction. I think it's been hijacked a little bit as a way to sell more 3D CAD licenses in the short term, which, it's, I think, a great idea, been hijacked. It'll resurrect as kind of the market gets a little more sanity to it. The 3D, total focus on 3D CAD has been absolutely wrong. 3D CAD is honestly, it's not the whole product record. There's electronic software, manufacturing process information that are elsewhere. MBE has to be aligned with that single source of the truth, that nebulous big database, right? That is the model, and it has to start with the requirements.
Yeah, well, MBE is a harder problem, as hard as 3D CAD was. MBE and functional modeling and the education is a harder problem, and 3D CAD is a necessary and important step to allow things to be digitized, but it's not the only step.
Right, and CAD is not the only model. To your point.
Absolutely right. And I think this is we're coming up on a new era here of design. This the dinosaurs and then 3D CAD, and now there's something coming, and it's going to be big data, right? It's just an enormous amount of information in a complex configuration that has to be managed well.
So, out of curiosity, as you're going out of the digital manufacturing industry, ostensibly, what advice would you give to somebody that's just starting their career in this industry?
Yeah, so like at this point, do you look back and you say, "Oh my God, do not go into digital manufacturing"? Or
yeah, like don't. That's what you're going to. No, don't do that.
No, actually, just the opposite. And I'll tell you, I'm absolutely thrilled working with the entrepreneurs that I'm working with in this space, because it is still very exciting. We're at the beginning of an era. I think there's a great opportunity. I think, frankly, we need to be encouraging this next generation, right? Absolutely learn to code, right? Do not, you don't have to be a great coder, but know enough about coding, software architectures, right? So you don't become a victim to some of the hype trends that are going on. Cloud's going to change everything. It's nonsense, right? We need to teach this next generation, to be a good educated consumer of this PLM philosophy. And then, oh my God, the opportunities here are huge, absolutely huge. The problem has not been solved yet, and the problem set's even changing, right? This next era kind of idea.
So, you talked before, I guess you said this a bunch, that basically to succeed going forward, you think that there needs to be a disruption in the industry. What is that disruption? What triggers that disruption any more than what's already underway?
As much as Aras was considered a disruptor of the PLM space, frankly, what we did was very incremental, and still Aras is still incrementally continuing to innovate and really leaning in hard to that low-code platform idea, where we want the PLM system or the software system of the basis of the system of record. We want that to be able to evolve even daily as the business needs change. I think, that was maybe a little disruptive when we started. I think the open source was a little disruptive when we started. But if you looking backwards at it, these were all incremental changes. And I think that's actually how we move forward. We're not going to wake up tomorrow morning and realize that AI has killed 3D CAD. It's not going to happen. But AI and generative will, working with, I know the Ansys guys do some crazy stuff with simulation and generative, and this is going to incrementally find itself into the design process. And one of the things I'm encouraging my portfolio of these startups to never forget about manufacturing. Right, this is not just about the next generation of design, and then drop it off or throw it over the wall right into manufacturing. We got to be thinking about how this plays out kind of through the whole product life cycle. Yeah, great opportunity. I think it will be incremental, which again leads itself to lots of room for aggressive entrepreneurs, innovators to add their 2 cents to this journey.
I think I like what you just said about not forgetting about manufacturing, because I think that's one thing that PLM actually did do to design is tie it to manufacturing. The whole throw it over the wall thing has been around for a really long time. And that used to be a much bigger problem than it is now, because I feel like PLM has at least linked the various functions together.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, well, I think this has been, I want to be cognizant of our time, and we always try to keep these podcasts to, roughly the same amount. So I do want to thank you very much for joining us today and taking a look at kind of the PLM industry as a whole and some of the things that's, in the past, in the future, what we see happening. So thank you very much for your time.
Great to catch up with both of you, Jen and Eric. This was fun.
And remind our listeners, if there's anything that we didn't discuss today that you have questions for Eric or I or even Peter, we can certainly forward those along. If there's anything we haven't talked about on this podcast as far as a topic that you'd like us to delve into, please reach out, let us know, be part of the conversation. And until the next time, stay sharp.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Stay Sharp with Razorleaf. We are excited to be part of ushering in a new year with you in 2024. If you have any questions or comments for our podcast team, or have an idea for a new topic for our team to cover this year, please send an email to podcast@razorleaf.com. We would love to hear from you. Until next time, stay sharp.